Good morning. Good morning, all. Um, Welcome to the last day of the workshop. I'm happy to see that we're all here. Um, Again, we arranged the weather especially so that you wouldn't feel too bad about being in here locked up for for the duration of the day. Today we have what, in my view, is perhaps the most interesting part of the 3 days, which is the experiences of the member countries represented here. Um, and each one of you will give us a perspective either on a general view of your port, or some of you have chosen specific instances or areas to present, and we thank you for that. Our first speaker, who I invite up here, Curtis, please, if you can come up. Let me introduce Curtis for a little bit before he gets up here and we load up his presentation. Uh, Curtis from Antigua and Barbuda is a trained management consultant and is a member of the Caribbean Institute of Certified Management Consultants. He has served as a research consultant for case study research for the University of Indiana and the University of the West Indies on competitiveness and global value chain analysis. Mr. Denny has over 20 years' experience in ocean transportation, in operation management, and logistics. He has served as a marine cargo surveyor for the local agent of Lloyd's of London. Between 2009 and 2013, he facilitated foreign direct investment when he served as a research and information development manager and business facilitation officer for the Investment Promotion Agency of the Government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Mr. Denny is a facilitator and has lectured in the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank and the Center for Enterprise Development on entrepreneurship, business strategy, marketing, leadership, and trade information management. He holds an MBA from the University of Liverpool and is currently a doctoral candidate at Walden University, where he is specializing in his studies in entrepreneurship. He currently serves as a port operation manager of Antigua and Barbuda's Port Authority, where he is a part of the new management team that is implementing a new development strategy for the port. Curtis. Anywhere you want to.
Thank you.
Thank you. There you go.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you very much, George, for facilitating me. And I am, sometimes when I do presentations, I am always reminded of a story of a boy who was running through the village, bragging that he had cut off a lion's tail and that he was a very, very brave boy. So someone said, if you're that brave, why didn't you cut off the lion's head? He said, oh no, somebody had done that before. Yeah. So that's in view. I just want to give you an overview of the architectural maritime administration of Antigua and Barbuda. Some of the folks I met before, from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but I am on a 2-year contract with the Port of Antigua and Barbuda to facilitate a modernization strategy for the port. Okay, next slide. Well, that's basically an overview of the geographical location of Antigua. Next slide, please. Okay. The Barbuda Antigua Maritime Administration is comprised of several entities, including the Maritime Service and Merchant Shipping, which is referred to in local as ADAMS. You have the Defense Force, the Coast Guard, the National Office of Disaster Services, and the National Solid Waste Management. These and the Port Authority, these constitute the national safety mechanism that governs the maritime administration in Antigua and Barbuda. Next slide. These different agencies, they have specific functions. The Antigua Coast Guard, they primarily concerned with search and rescue, and navigational warnings and messages, etc. While the Adams primarily they deal with all of the port state controls. They're the primary agency in really governing maritime safety as we know it in Antigua and Barbuda. And of course, there is the Port Authority, which addresses the matters that relates to aids to navigations, and also to the we have the Port Chief Facility Officer, who primarily supports the and implement the structures that deals with the ISPS code. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide is primarily gives you the whole architectural overview as to who does what in the scheme of things in Antigua. The Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is assigned as the designated authority for the administration of maritime security. In other countries, I guess each country will have their own unique context. I think some countries may have the Coast Guard under the Ministry of National Security. Next slide, please. Yes. Now, I just want to focus on this slide here. Part of the safety culture of Antigua, and to ensure that they're keeping in line with the international obligation, what they have done is that they have established the Maritime Affairs Committee, which is chaired by Adams. And in this committee, they then facilitated a workshop to try to familiarize the various stakeholder agencies who would have representatives. And these representatives are trained to get a sense as to what are the key or the main obligations that Antigua and Barbuda has signed on to, and to prepare them also for the voluntary state audit. Antigua decided to participate voluntarily in the state audit so that the organization, the country as a whole, would be able to identify gaps in their security mechanisms. So this was done in 2012 by the IMO. So they came in and they issued a confidential report, and this allowed the country to address all of the holes and gaps that they see in their the whole maritime architectural framework. The advantage of having done the audit is that it places Antigua a couple years down for inspection, because we did the audit in 2012, and now we're in the process of doing our post-certification certification. But what it does is that the audit really bring to light a lot of the hidden factors that impede the maritime administration, and it brought to the authorities all of these key areas. I can't tell you what those areas are because the document is confidential, classified document at the state, but for countries who are going to do that audit, it's a very good approach to help to see identify areas of vulnerability and areas where you should improve in your whole your maritime architectural framework. Next slide, please. So this is the Maritime Affairs Committee that was established, and as I said before, it covered all of the various stakeholder agencies who would have a part: the Port Authority, the Fisheries, the Commanding Officer of the Coast Guard, Environmental Officer, Solid Waste, and the National Office of Disaster Services. Next slide, please. Now, the maritime safety of Antigua and the maritime security is really governed by the Antigua Merchant Shipping Act of 26, and it was established, it was amended to establish the Adams as the Maritime Administration of Antigua and Barbuda, which deals primarily with flag registration of vessels and ensuring, as I said before, the relevant controls are in place for the country. Next slide, please. I just thought I'd put in this slide here to give us a sense of the role of the Port Authority, generally speaking, in different countries. Sometimes one of the problems that you see with port authorities is that they're sometimes seen from a negative angle. I don't know if you guys you have experienced it, is that whenever you have customers who come to clear goods at the customs, you will normally hear they say that they had a problem at the port. And it's really not a problem at the port, it's a problem at the customs. And we get a bad rap because as far as the general public is of the view, as they get to the port, then it is the port as a collect that is dealing with them. So many times the customs department get off the hook when they do when they deliver bad services, etc., etc. The port authority ends up carrying the bag. I went to the port and they treated me bad, you know. So, but I just want to say this from a national economic perspective, that the port authority is a critical arm of the government, and it promotes competitiveness, facilitate innovation, trade facilitation, and really serves as a critical element in the whole global value chain perspective. Is that it is basically at the end, in terms of the border issue, end of the value chain, in getting goods and services in, and it's part of the trade facilitation national issues for government in international trade. And of course, the port is beneficial for employment generation and for creating social transformation, and also too for facilitating entrepreneurship and foreign direct investment. Next slide, please. I just want to say that these are basic threats that we face at the port, and I just want to focus on shipping incidents here and just probably close my slide in a few. I don't know if most persons outside of this room, a lot of the people don't really understand the natural, dangers or hazards that you face working at a port, because you're handling a lot of cargo, and sometimes the cargo is not correctly identified and not correctly stored, and you have various port users, different persons coming in the port, and I think it is relevant at this time to really look at cargo handling and to see how best the port users and all of the other relevant stakeholders can create these levels of awareness so that you create a culture of safety at the port. And I think that, to me, is what is really matters. As we look at all the threats, we are not a threat really for terrorism, they're drug trafficking, but I think every day the probability of an accident occurring in the port is there, and that's a matter that we have to continue to address. Next slide, please. Okay, this is just an overview of the port and how Antigua is laid out. And I just for the sake of time, I just want to stop right there. And thank you very much for listening to me. As I said, the intent is to just really show you an architectural framework of how maritime safety and our administration is carried out in Antigua and Barbuda. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you very much. Excuse me, and congratulations. I actually agree with that that concept of creating awareness first in order to then build a culture. There we go. So anyway, again, floor is open to comments or questions for Curtis. Alfredo, please.
Good morning, Curtis. Just a question. You talked about that you do your audits on the port, voluntary audits. Who actually participates in that audit? Do you bring people from other ports to participate in that audit?
No, that audit is part of the mandate from the IMO. So the IMO would send in their own professionals, experts, and they will, a matter of fact, you request the audit, they will send the team in, and they will analyze the audits. The audit is done analyzing the country's obligation under the 10 IMO Convention. So your SOLAS, all of the entire legal framework and international obligation that you've made, the IMO officials will come in and they would audit you critically. Trust me, they do a comprehensive audit of, they look at your institutional framework, they look at your processes, they look at the actual, what is happening on the ground at the port, they analyze all the practices of the various stakeholder agencies, and they will give you that confidential document. The document that I have read here is nearly 100 pages, and it gives you a critical overview of whether or not the state is readily addressing all of its international obligations. So it is something that is done by the IMO, not by any other agency, okay, that the state has done. I want to say this, I think yesterday, I think when we did the presentation on the hazards, and we were asking about training in hazmat training, I think somebody had mentioned that. I must say at this time that I'm speaking to you, we at the Antigua Port Authority, we are now having a hazmat training free, and this is done through our Labor Department. We requested it, and it's done through the ILO. The ILO provides technical assistance for hazmat training. So in your relevant agencies, when you go back, they will be happy and most pleased to come in to conduct that training for you and help to build that institutional and technical capacity for your respective organization. And I think that is an avenue that we have exploited, and it's part of the strategy to develop and create that level of awareness, and so that we know exactly what's happening at the Port Authority. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Great. Thank you, Curtis.
Oh, thank you
Thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
I'll hand the certificates of participation at the end for everybody.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to, please, exactly, Anthony, come on over here. Our next presenter, Anthony Ben from Barbados, is going to speak a little bit about the port security at the Port of Bridgetown. And I don't know, Anthony, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit for people here.
Good morning, facilitator, fellow delegates, distinguished guests. I was told to introduce myself. I'm Anthony Ben. I'm the Chief of Security, Manager of Security Services on PFSO for the Port of Bridgetown, Barbados, and it gives me great pleasure on behalf of Barbados and the Bridgetown Port to give you, yesterday we heard an overview of security measures at the Port of Miami, and we want to give you our perspective as it relates to our security procedures and some of our measures that we have in place to protect the Port of Bridgetown and then by extension our country. Next slide. Okay, not working. So the presentation will involve my introductory remarks, which we did, brief overview of port security, a brief overview of some of our marine services, and allow for questions. Next slide, please. Now, the Port of Bridgetown is a multi-purpose facility. We engage in the handle of general cargo, a container terminal, cruise facility. As you know, we are a major cruise port, and we are a major home port for mostly European vessels in their winter. And we also have a dry bulk facility at the port. Next slide. This is a pictorial overview of our lovely port, and we can hold upwards of 6 cruise vessels at a time. There's room for a 7th at another pier, which is adjacent on your left. Next slide. Now, port security is crucial to the economic viability of any country, and indeed of ours. As you know, if the security procedures and measures at the port are not robust, then the country as a whole is exposed. Effective security measures contribute to overall crime prevention strategies, helping mitigate threats such as illegal drugs, arms, trafficking people, and other forms of organized criminal activities. Next slide, please. So we are saying that effective port security requires a network of relationships to protect the flow of trade and passengers. And in this regard, we have to ensure that all the various regulatory agencies and the port work together to ensure that security measures are implemented and maintained to ensure a safe and secure environment. And this follows on from the previous slide as it relates to protecting the wider country and ensuring its economic viability. Next slide, please. So Barbados Port believes that a strategic hemispheric framework is needed to assist ports in developing the relevant institutional and technical capacities to implement required port security measures. As you're aware, many of our islands are small and lack the financial resources to implement robust security measures as you would have probably in larger ports. But we are still expected to protect the port. And I believe that if we come together and pool our resources rather than trying to do it alone, there needs to be a framework at the hemispheric level. Because the regional level, we may not have the capacity or the funds to ensure that our security measures are as robust as they need to be and as they should be. Because we must recognize that tourism is very important to the economic viability of many nations in the Caribbean, and a cruise ship does not leave its point of origination in Miami or wherever and come to Barbados alone. It goes to multiple ports, and that ship expects to have robust security measures in place comparable to the standards that they're accustomed to in U.S. ports. Next slide, please. Against this background, we'll take a brief look at some of our security initiatives at the Port of Bridgetown. And all the pictures you're seeing are pictures of various aspects of the operations of the port. Next slide. Right. Some of our systems involve new security pass system that we've implemented. Because of the layout of the port, we have placed the port we've divided the port into zones, so they're invisible lines. So a person will state his business by application in writing, saying what business you want to transact in the port, and based on that, you are given a pass for that particular area. If you're caught outside of that area, then you can expect that there'll be consequences. And usually they are quite severe because we do not compromise security. We have an extensive CCTV system. We have approximately 50 cameras, and we are looking to improve the system. You see a picture in the center of our command center, which is monitored, which is manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we have the RFID platform, so we can we have the capacity to issue a pass, and that pass will track your movement in the port, so we can tell you where you went. And I already mentioned our command center. Next slide, please. We also have mobile scanner, VACUS, and we have hull inspection capability equipment, ROVs. So, next slide. And this slide just seeks to establish some of the security partnerships that we spoke to earlier as we maybe went on to this slide about hemispheric cooperation, public-private sector committees. Of course, we work very closely with all the vessels that come to the port. We are involved in the national security system, National Security Committee, which is chaired by our Prime Minister and our Chief Executive Officer. At every meeting, he's required to present a report on port security and how the port is going. And of course, we have very close relationships with the U.S. Coast Guard. They come to Barbados every year in January for the last 8 years consistently, and what they do is they audit our procedures and issue a country report via the diplomatic channels on their findings. And to date, we've not had any adverse comments from the Coast Guard, quite the opposite. One disappointing point for me is that we don't have the regional framework as we should. I dare say regional or hemispheric framework as it relates to port security. Sure, we have workshops and seminars like these, but when we leave here, I find that there's no cooperation, no system, no structure in place for regional port security operatives to communicate, and in a lot of instances there are security incidents at ports, and you have to read about them in the paper or hear about them on the news, in the TV, and I think that's very disappointing. And I have been an advocate for this for the 8 years that I have been at the port, and I will continue to speak publicly on this point until I am satisfied that we have a system in place. I know the U.S. has systems in place because the Coast Guard is universal as it relates to U.S. ports. They're all over the place. And if something happens in the port of Miami, within minutes, the port in Alaska will know because of the systems. But something can happen in Barbados today or in Jamaica, and it takes you days to find out. And I think that that's really sad in today's, with all the technology that we have. Next slide. I'll speak a little bit more on that as we go on. Now, we found our measures have led to greater security awareness, both in and outside of the organization, and has improved our emergency and contingency procedures and planning. And right now we are in the process of reviewing our contingency and emergency plans. As we speak, there are meetings going on with a view to upgrading it and to make sure that it really remains relevant. And we've been voted most secure and safe port in the Caribbean by the Caribbean Shipping Association on a number of occasions. Next slide, please. Some concerns we have, obviously, lack of financial resources. Inter-island operators, there are some small vessels which are not required to comply or conform with the provisions of the ISPS code that operates between the islands, and obviously the security procedures around those vessels are not as robust as they should be. Of course, there are resistance to some security procedures by some people, and I believe that this will be a challenge in all ports. Training is another area of concern for us, and accessing said training. And I believe that there needs to be a harmonized training regime at the regional level. And this is a point too that is very dear to my heart. I think that the time has come where we need to stop the individualized training that we do. Barbados does its thing, Trinidad does its thing, and come together. Because what I find from my experience is that, especially with passengers on cruise ships, they go to a port it's one procedure to enter. They come to my port, another procedure to enter. They go to Europe, and it's confusing. And then it's frustrating to some of them, and they express their frustrations. I just came from St. Kitts yesterday, and I didn't have to do that. But you have to do it in Barbados. Where if we could come together and formulate training programs for our security officers, then I think that this would help to mitigate this situation. We have a challenge, like all other ports, I imagine, with illegal drugs and weapons. And given our robust security procedures, we've been having some good success as it relates to detection, especially of illegal drugs. And of course, supply chain security. We are seeing increasing incidents of container seals being tampered with. We see where the criminals now, they're duplicating the seals, they're going in the containers, and when you open the container, you see a seal with the same number as the one that is on there now that they're cut off and forgot to take out of that container. One disappointing aspect for me, and we've expressed our disappointment to the relevant authorities, is the fact that there are some countries, particularly the United States, that go into the authorities go into the container, which is their right. No problem with that. Support that. But then they change the seal, but they don't change the accompanying documentation. So the documentation that we receive has on the original seal information, which means we have a problem with that container. Because I believe that once you change the seal as a regulatory agency, then you must make the shipping agent or the company do the paperwork and let the paperwork reflect that the seal has been changed, that you went into the container, so that at our end, we don't feel that there was illegal tampering. And on this point, we've interacted with CBP in Washington and the U.S. Coast Guard to have it resolved. And I believe that they are addressing that issue. Next point. Next slide, please. Some of our plans, continuous training. We are constantly reviewing our protocols with our partners, customs, immigration, and the other regulatory agencies, to ensure that they remain relevant and that they are on board with us. We are very sweet on this next bullet, establish a regional port facility security association. And I believe that as we are in this forum, I should replace the word regional with hemispheric. Like I said, there's no formal association apparatus for port security practitioners. It was the case that in a lot of instances, the security of the port was the responsibility of the National Police Force. But over time, as ports privatized and evolved, the security responsibility was taken over by the port itself, who brought in private security. Which means that the National Police, they are no longer directly responsible for port security, as is the case with us. And I'm sure that that's the model that a lot of other ports employ. But we have not evolved in terms of coming together of port security practitioners at this new level. And I believe that the time is right. That we have some form of formal association of the persons responsible for port security and the implementation and the oversight of the ISPS code. We've done some groundwork in this regard, in that we have a constitution for the association. The only thing that we need now is the coming together, a framework to bring people together. And I'm hoping that Jorge is hearing me and that he will assist in this regard. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, efficient and effective security regime is vital. It is understood that the ISPS code requires the development of plans, bearing in mind the need to maintain flows, both as it relates to passenger and cargo. However, we cannot compromise security, and this philosophy will continue to dictate our decisions and actions as it relates to security within our port. Next slide. As it relates to maritime safety, which is a key focus of the port, we seek to ensure our environment remains safe, secure, and clean. Next slide, please. And these are some of the services that we offer. There's a pictorial overview. Next slide. Aids to navigation. You have lighthouses, signal lights, range, entry channel buoys. Next slide. Wastewater reception and incinerator facilities on the port. So we offer, under our national regulations, it is against the law to take garbage from a ship and take it into a landfill or into the country. So we have to dispose of it. So we have an incinerator on port that we do that for a small fee, of course. Pardon? Next slide. Some of the challenges that we are facing currently: lack of training opportunities and lack of financial resources to fully execute and implement our plans. And we in Barbados, we are doing it in a phased approach as it relates to the implementation and of some of the plans that we have as it relates to security. Next slide, please. Questions? Thank you very much.
Good morning. Cyril Roca, Port Department, Nassau, Bahamas. I got a question with reference to your tug vessels. Are they owned by the Barbados government or are they private?
They're owned by us.
Okay, and I see where you have any vessel, I mean, that is 1,000 tons or 168 meters, pallage is compulsory. That to supply also to the cruise ships?
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, that Alfredo and over here after, please.
Anthony, good morning. Couple of things. First of all, I want to commend you because you are way ahead of the curve on your security based on what you presented here. Obviously, you know, you're very, very emotional about your security, and I like that. I know that George is going to have his hands full with the CIP when I get ready to throw this out there. But as I said before, and as I said in my presentation, Port of Miami was actually the first one. It's a pilot program with the State Department, International Narcotics and Law Enforcement, which you said you made a request through. I know that it was mentioned to me, but I don't have the particulars on what the request is going to be. That's actually coordinated to the State Department, and then they come to me once it's finalized. I do have a meeting tomorrow afternoon with them here in DC, and I will inquire about your request. But as far as a regionalization, I agree with you 100%. When we got that MOU, it started very small. Again, it started with Bahamas and Trinidad and Tobago. They actually came out on port, and that's exactly what it was. It was a training week for two ports to work together and see the differences and the best practices of all three of us pretty much put together. And my goal from Port of Miami's perspective, and because I've gotten this MOU through and being the first port to get this MOU through the State Department, is to work now with George and the CIP to further that MOU and possibly create a regional training center at the Port of Miami so that we can bring all our partners from all the different countries where, like you said, our cruise ships go out there. So I will work with George on that and the state to make sure that happens. Again, we're in the baby steps right now because this MOU just got signed in August, and we just had our first group a couple of months ago. So that was kind of the pilot to see how it worked. It seemed like the training was very receptive. Everyone really liked the training. And now I'm getting ready to do the second phase of the training where we actually send some of our instructors out there to do, you know, the K9 for the weapons and the narcotics and everything else that they're asking for the different countries. That's the purpose of my meeting here Thursday. So I hear you on the regionalization. You talked about the Coast Guard being there, and the exchange of information. Do you all not have access to Homeport that the Coast Guard offers? It's an online system.
Thank you. We do. First, let me say that I've studied your model very carefully, the model at Miami Port, and I believe that a lot of the features that the model that we employ have come from the Port of Miami. Your predecessor had promised to assist us as it relates to the training that you mentioned, so I'm very pleased to hear that that's still on the front burner as it relates to you, and we've not spoken. And also the whole question of the formation of the association. I know that U.S. Coast Guard, they were actively engaged in trying to establish a chat room in the beginning stages, so that at least that would facilitate some form of communication. But the problem was that, from how they explained it, they don't have the capacity to do that. The Navy, they would have to ask the U.S. Navy to do it. And I think that there were some issues with that arrangement, just let me say that. But I am happy to hear that you are still pursuing some of the broad objectives that we've been trying to achieve over the number of years. And like I said, we'll soldier on as it relates to these issues because we believe that they are fundamental and that they're important. And it does not make sense that one country is ahead of the curve and another is not, because at the end of the day, it's going to impact us all. If the cruise industry falls through, it's going to fall through for everybody. If there's an incident in St. Lucia, it's going to impact on St. Kitts, in Barbados, Trinidad, all of us, because it's an itinerary. It's not a country thing. And that's why we are so speed on this.
Thank you very much, Anthony. If I may reply really quickly, I agree. I will. Again, first, congratulations. I think that you guys are doing a wonderful job, and you presented it very succinctly and very well. I hear you. I hear the need for a regional something, perhaps as a first step to a hemispheric one, which is harder to do. The Caribbean basin shares many features. You guys have all a common stake on certain things, amongst them the health of the cruise industry. This has enormous implications for you, and the theme of security and safety is intrinsical to that success. I heard there's three things here. I think that one, you mentioned the need for an efficient communication system, especially amongst the Caribbean. Perhaps security officers or security things, and this is something that perhaps could serve as a first step, as a basis to build upon this hemispheric or regional framework that you speak about. The second point I heard you say is about the harmonized training regime, which I think is a brilliant idea as well. At least share a common curricula, and then each nation can then specialize or place more emphasis on some aspects of others, but I do think that having a common base of high quality human resource training is essential, and that of course is the second part. And for that second part, I hear what Alfredo Ferrer is offering and saying, and I welcome it and promise to work with you on that. See how we can structure something in there, and not only that. Let me go a step further and say that, within that framework that Alfredo was mentioning, where please consider the assistance of Secretariat in that program, and perhaps being able to collaborate or contribute with flying some of these experts to some of your countries, and perhaps, I realize that it's easier for you all to get together somewhere in the Caribbean than to come all the way over here, and so we could create economies of scale. We could work something out. I'm just going to speak out of the top of my head now, but where we could collaboratively put something like this together, where more people get trained, where there's a higher impact, because it's easier for more people to be together in one particular location. So we'll work on that. But on the other hand of this, I'm going to ask you to help me help you. And by that, I mean that the committee, the Inter-American Committee on Ports, the main meeting is this June here in Washington, D.C., June 18th, 19th, and 20th. And your port authorities, as you know, or some of you, depending on who's here, have already been invited. And I believe it is crucial, not only that you attend or you have your port authority attend and encourage that, but, Anthony, and here's the thing, let's work from now to then so that Barbados can put forth a proposal to the committee at large to start working on this, because unfortunately, my best intentions are either curtailed or potentialized depending on what the committee as a whole gives me as a mandate. So if we can get this issue, this theme, which I think of crucial and strategic importance for the region, start working on and we can do this, and I just briefly spoke about it to Andrew, who chairs the advisory technical group on port security. So there's a system within the committee already working on it. And we can work on this so that it's presented in June for the approval of the 34 member states. And, once we have that rubber stamp, we can get in earnest working on that. But for that, I need your help. We need to work together to make that simple proposal, but saying we would like to put this forth to the committee. And that way is a win-win all around. So again, thank you very, very much. Thank you, Anthony. And this is what it's all about. Thank you very much. That is exactly why we're here. This is why not only the OAS, but in this particular case, the secretariat of the committee is here for that, to listen to you, to work with you in order to bring issues of interest to the committee as a whole, to have those plans approved, those proposals approved, in order for us to work collaboratively for some common goal. So I encourage you to please approach the secretariat with ideas such as Anthony's. Anyway, well, now we have Michael Jenkins here from Belize. Michael, you want to say a few words to us about yourself, if you want to, and of course the presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Michael Jenkins. Again, I'm from Belize, the Belize Port Authority. I'm the Chief Safety and Security Officer for the authority, responsible for port facility security, hydrographic surveys, aids to navigation, and my post, I have been recently appointed to this post 6 months ago, and I have been working with the Port Authority for the past 9 years. Next slide, please. This is, we are bordered by Mexico in the north and Guatemala to the south. And we have 4 major port facilities, 2 of which are at sea due to our depths of water. And the main port is in the Belize City area, the main commercial port. Next slide, please. The Belize Port Authority, the laws of Belize which regulates the maritime industry, Chapter 233, Belize Port Authority Act, administration, that deals with administration, the designation of ports, tariffs, and pilotage. Chapter 234, Harbors and Merchant Shipping Act, that deals with the coastal and river trade, certification of masters and vessels, and ATONs. Next slide. Selected conventions and codes ratified by Belize. The Belize Port Authority is a focal point for all matters as it relates to international shipping, maritime search and rescue, 1979, SOLAS, MARPOL, tonnage, COLREG, sorry for the repetitive of MARPOL, STCW, and load line. Next slide. Associated laws and agencies, Chapter 236, the Registrar of Merchant Shipping, Imarbe, or the flag state, that deals with ship registry. Act 19 of 2004, the Belize National Coast Guard Act, Coastal State Regulatory Agency, Prevention of Marine Pollution, illegal fishing, illegal goods, exploitation, and its enhancing of port security and safety. Next slide, please. Our mission is to offer professional, courteous, and effective technical services to Belize maritime community with the main focus on safety, security of shipping operations, and protection of our marine environment, and to engage our public and private partners and stakeholders in the development of Belize's maritime industry. Roles and responsibilities: to regulate the ports to serve the public interests, to regulate and control navigation within our territorial waters of Belize, to maintain, improve, and regulate the safe and secure use of port services and facilities, and to protect the environment and investigate maritime casualties. Next slide. Continuation, to provide piloted services and ATON services, to exercise the duties and functions relating to shipping and navigation under the provision of any other law. Tasks: we patrol all waters to ensure boating and navigational safety, environmental protection, respond to and broadcast all relevant information relating to search and rescue and evacuation operations, disseminate accurate and update information relevant to mariners in an efficient manner. Next slide. We also maintain all ATONs, conduct port state control inspection, maintain a security buffer zone around cruise ship anchorage, and educate mariners on all aspects relating to boating safety. Next slide. I think we go back. The Belize Port Authority register and license all vessels in the coastal and river trade. That includes, we also take pictures of all domestic vessels. So we have we also have paperwork and we have a visual of all vessels in our territorial waters. Their current structure. Port state control is not directly under my supervision, but I was first a port state control officer. And since I'm in the position of safety and security, we usually have a briefing before the port state goes on board. So they would usually come into my office and we do that briefing. And then I'm responsible for the hydrographic department that has 4 officers. We have 12 lighthouse keepers, 5 port state inspectors, 4 licensing and registration officer, 1 technician. Next slide. Assigned tasks. Security, ISPS code, and the company assets. We do inspection and licensing of local vessels, as said before. License of boat masters. Conduct casualty inquiries and other marine-related activities. Maintain navigational aids and conduct hydrographic survey. Next slide. International ship calls. In 2013, we had over 900 ship calls. Container ship, reefers, general cargo, bulk carriers, tankers, and cruise ships. On our busiest day, which is right now, we are in our high season for cruise ships, and we can get up to 6 cruise ships on a Wednesday. And the difficulty with that is that we don't have it's not a deep water port. So all passengers are tendered to shore. And on that given day, we can have 15,000 passengers at port. Um, Presently, there are no, Royal Caribbean is building a new port facility, and Norwegian, but there is a lot of red tape with the environmental aspect of that development. Next slide, please. Limitation on navigational charts, no large-scale charts for certain areas of the country, and that limits our effectiveness in conducting security enforcement. As you know, Belize is a transshipment area, or it's a corridor for drug trafficking. Because we are sheltered by the barrier reef, we have the go fast boats that uses our territorial waters inside the reef, where it's sheltered water and they can go much faster. We have a lot of help from the U.S. Coast Guard, but they deal with the Belize Coast Guard and not really with the Port Authority. So we work hand in hand with the Coast Guard to enforce our laws. Last updated for our navigational chart was 2006, and that was only for the Belize City Harbor. It do not reflect changes from siltation and natural disasters that we have experienced over the past years. Some areas remain uncharted, and some small land masses not shown. This is the Belize City Harbor, and you can see that channel is the only way into the Belize City Harbor. It's a natural channel, it's not a dredge channel. And all vessels are anchored off the coast, all cruise ships, I would say. Next slide. A larger scale view. The area of the anchorage is shown in the red. I'm not sure if you can see it clearly, but there is 3 anchorage positions there. One for cruise ships, one for sugar ships, and one for the molasses ship. And each area, the molasses ship and the molasses ship and the sugar ship, we consider a port facility by itself. Actually, the molasses ship is a cement ship. It's an old cement, colonial cement ship made of cement. So it doesn't move, it stays right there, and we consider that a facility on its own. Next slide. This is the second way of entering into our territorial waters, and that's from the southern end. As you all may know, we have some conflicting situation with our borders with the Guatemalans that we are trying to resolve. In the south, that's where it's hard to show there, but in the corner there, that's where Norwegian is planning to do a port facility, and it's off the coast. Yeah. So there's a small island here that the Norwegian is investing over $50 million US, and that will it's going to create some challenges for us because our main office is about 150 miles to the north, and it will create challenges because of resources. Next slide, please. Well, that's the key in the bottom, Harvest Key. That's the actual island that Norwegian is going to build their new cruise port. Next slide. Port facility security, access control, 1,000 feet security buffer zone around each cruise ship, infrastructure modernization, maintenance of turning basin and channel, very shallow coastal waters. Cruise ships are only able to anchor 6 miles from shore. Tenders used from ship to shore. Port safety and security. Next slide. Response capability. Insufficient patrol capability, vessel and manpower. Inadequate response capability to oil spill and fire on board ships. Limited booms to contain spills. We only have approximately 5,000 feet of river and ocean booms. Next slide. We maintain a security zone around cruise ships in the harbor due to our porous maritime border. So we try to make sure that we have that security around the ships. It's hard to detect the smaller vessels moving to and from our bordering countries. It's important to have this security to deter the illegal fishing, drug trafficking, human smuggling, and any terrorist activities. Next slide. Insufficient resources to monitor and control our large maritime area. This requires a combined effort by all relevant maritime departments, the Belize Coast Guard, the Fisheries Department, Coastal Zone Management, and other NGOs that are in conservation of our maritime resources. Next slide. Maritime growth. In security, patrol boats, container scanners, and increased response capability to oil spills and fire on board ships. And navigation, hydrographic data production, important for continued growth and safety of navigation. Important that charts are updated with new information to fully utilize our equipment and human resources. Next slide. Recent threats. A recent incident that posed a security and safety risk was a runaway tug and barge which collided into the trestle of the main commercial port. This led to the closure of the port for more than a week. Any extended port closure will negatively affect any economy of our country. And we were happy that, that we got that situation under control, and it could have been worse, and we didn't have any loss of life. Next slide. Forward. The country of Belize appreciates and asks for the continued support to safeguard the maritime industry for a long-term development of the nation and the region, and to fulfill our international obligations for safety and security in the maritime industry. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for Michael?
Just a quick one. The facility that you said in our region is investing in, when the ships go there, they will still have to tender to Belize, to the mainland, or?
Yes, they will still have to tender to mainland. There is a proposal to build a bridge from the island to the closest shore base.
Yeah, just asking the ship that you alluded to, that is stationary, that is made from concrete, and it's declared by you as a port facility. Do you have a specific security plan for that vessel?
Yes, each facility must have a security plan, and we just verified that. We've verified the security plan just 2 months ago. So they are all in compliance. We had a visit from the U.S. liaison officer for port security in February, Mr. Adam Burst, and he was taken to all port facilities, and some recommendations were made, but his visit was not actually for to do an assessment, but more of a familiarity visit because he had just taken up that post. So, but with his knowledge, he had conveyed certain things he saw that could have improved.
I just wondering, you mentioned the limited resources, maritime-wise, Coast Guard, and this vessel is anchor offshore.
Yes, sir.
So I guess it poses a big challenge to you to get it secure.
It is a challenge. The good thing about it is it's up where our headquarters is. It's approximately 6 miles from our headquarters. So we have 2 patrol vessels and 1 hydrographic vessel. So with the 2 vessels, we can do sufficient security patrols within the Belize City Harbor. But as you extend outside the Belize City Harbor, that's where the challenge comes in.
Great. Anyone else?
Got a question. When the ships anchor outside the harbor, are they allowed to anchor anywhere, or are they on mooring buoys?
No, they're not mooring buoys. They're anchored. Belize is compulsory pilotage, so the pilots are usually responsible for determining the position, and then we have our communication center that the pilots will communicate with and tell them their anchorage position. The communication then confirms that position, and then the go-ahead is given. And we have a notice of our arrival procedure 48 hours before arriving. So depending on how many ships for that day, then we can better decide where our ship will be anchored.
Great. Well, thank you, Michael, again.
Thank you.
Yep.
Let me say good morning. Oh, sorry. All right.
If I may, yes, I know. Thank you, Michael, and I apologize for not being able to be here for the presentation. I wanted to let you all know, because you all asked me in different occasions, but what we're doing as far as presentations are concerned, we're going to give you each one of these memory sticks, USB memory sticks, with all the presentations that we've had since Monday, including those that we've had today, and including those that participants brought with them, but for one reason or another were not able to present. They'll still be included in the USB, so that you may take with you the experiences of all participants, even if they weren't up here presenting. So anyway, go ahead, Benoit.
Okay, I am Benoit Badwell, Chief Executive Officer of the Dominica Air and Seaports Authority, responsible for the 2 airports on the island and 4 ports, 2 dedicated cruise ship berths and 2 cargo piers. So this slide up here is always put up when we talk about Dominica, so that persons in the room do not get us mixed up with our Spanish-speaking neighbors. So you can see smack where we are in terms of in the middle of the Caribbean region, Dominica. Next slide, please. Just again to reemphasize who we are, because we need to make that distinction. It's just to give you an idea in terms of our location between Guadeloupe and Martinique. Next slide. 290 square miles. Next slide. And known as the Nature Islands of the Caribbean, and this gives you the reason why. Next slide. Next slide. Challenges of the port security. We in Dominica, we have several areas that we have to operate with. And like I said, we have two seaports, one major area in terms of ocean-going vessels carrying cargo. We also have another area in which we move passengers via ferry, and the passengers, we use it Guadeloupe and Martinique on a daily basis. So that we move quite a bit of persons or passengers through that facility. So just to give you an overview in terms of that, plus the next slide. As we go forward in relation to the IS code implementation, as you know, the ISPS code started the process for major transformation for port facilities worldwide. And that started from July 2004. And in Dominica, we have those two ports which we have approved plans for. And within the last decade, the port security and safety culture as a result changed dramatically, beginning from access control, how you access the port, the way in which cargo is handled at the port, and also extending to waterside security. So the whole culture which we had prior to the introduction of the ISPS code, the port culture in terms of safety has changed dramatically. As you can see in the photographs here, we have within the security unit, security divers. We have a number of persons trained to undertake various functions to ensure that we can keep within the mandate of the certification that we have. Next slide. And so, in terms of the ports in Dominica, we are better able now to, based on the years of experience, to identify critical assets, assess threats, assess vulnerabilities, to look at the whole specifics as it relates to our risk, the level of exposure we have, and to make recommended or recommend countermeasures to be able to do that. We've not suffered any issues during the past years in which we have implemented the ISPS code in terms of any major issue as it relates to terrorism or otherwise. So those things in terms of what we've been doing over the years have really helped us to better able to secure the facilities that we have to manage. Next slide. Nope, you're going back. Go forward. So there's a constant review of the risk exposure, which allow us to take informed decisions as it relates to manpower resources. So as we make those decisions, we're able to look and make the necessary decisions in relation to manpower resources required, the equipment required, because as events takes place and issues, we sort of reevaluate where we are and the equipment necessary to be able to do that. Once there's the financial resources, we make that. But again, it's based on the assessments that we undertake. And we can help prioritize the critical assets required based on the value and the consequence of loss. We're able then to make informed decisions. Next slide. So, based on some of the things in terms of lessons that we've learned, there have been a reduction in pilferage, which was an issue prior to the introduction of the ISPS code, which has resulted in the cost of cargo claims, reduction in the cost of cargo claims. We've had increased collaboration in terms of intelligence sharing with the various entities, that is the Coast Guard, the police, the Maritime Administration. So there have been more advanced monitoring measures in terms of things like CCTV and the rest. So we've improved in terms of safety and security measures. We have, in fact, been better able to do so. And we've had a better control on the port operations overall because of those things that we've been able to implement. And I want to say in terms of the increased communication, it is important because we've had very good relations with customs, the Maritime Administration, and the police in terms of helping to secure the environment in which we operate and to bolden the security aspects within the port. Again, in the past, there was not that high level of communication, but because of the increased level of communication, we are able to better safeguard the facilities that we operate. Next slide. So, I just want to point out some of the challenges that continue to be difficult for us in our port. We have changing trends in smuggling humans, drugs, and firearms. As you know, we do have one of our neighbors who we have quite a significant population in Dominica. They come in through legal means, but the difficulty is, and some of the other islands here have experienced, they do leave or immigrate through, not through the normal channels. And so that too is also an issue in terms of ensuring that we can deal with that. And then we have the issue of drugs and firearms. At present, there is lack of up-to-date equipment due to inadequate financial and other resources. As we go in terms of reviewing our processes, we realize that even some of the equipment, and given the fact that those persons moving items through the port do get very, very modern in terms of some of the techniques that they use. Surely some of the equipment which we have had and which we have been able to acquire several years ago through the World Bank initiative, some of that equipment do not or cannot deal with some of the modern day situations that we have. So that's an issue in terms of a challenge for us. And the question of waterside security. Our ports operate in close proximity to fishing areas. We are neighboring fishing areas just within very short distances. We have a fine line to draw with the fishing community. The hotels, one of our ports in the city, is right next to a hotel. So that gives you the kind of situation that we have in terms of ensuring that that fine line in terms of maintaining the waterside security is in fact a challenge. So it's never an easy challenge to enforce the required limits when vessels are in port, but we have to undertake that and at the same time have a trade-off with the persons like the fishing community, the Water Sports Association, and the hotels to ensure that there is the economics of the operation takes place, but at the same time, the question of safety and security is also secured. Next slide. So in terms of training for way forward, we're saying increase and advanced training for port security officials need to be undertaken in all areas, especially the issue of crisis and consequent management. We believe that this would help in countering any limitations of security, the security methods being used, because as you know, we need to strengthen security to the point where they have the responsiveness of security is not waiting. Security has to be trained to the point where they can be equipped to respond to the event that require. But not only in responding, but they must also be able to understand during the period of response in terms of crisis and consequence management, in terms of how they function. So we believe that we should ensure that quality training provided, which would complement the execution of the port security plan. And I want to air the sentiments expressed by Barbados earlier in relation to the formation of that security committee, and to have across the board training so that we deal with the region in a way where that cross-border training would enable those vessels and ships which call at all of the ports to have some sort of system whereby they can all operate in a framework which is clearly understood, and that our security personnel behave in a manner that is consistent with what law enforcement requires throughout from a professional standpoint. equipment, the provision of necessary hardware equipment to be able to assist the security to execute their functions more effectively in the areas of CCTV, baggage screening, waterside security, etc. In Dominica, I know that we're putting our security officers through software training, Eagle Eye security, software training with libraries and so on. So as new features come on, they are familiar with some of these new things that are coming on stream. And that goes so that you can do the self-training via online. And that too is something that needs to be looked at, so that if you have a concentration within the region of persons going through that particular program, then you can have effectively security officers right through the region which have the same basic training. Cooperation. There is need for greater cooperation between law enforcement agencies, ship operators, and the port in the conduct of drills and exercises on a broader scale. Because I believe these drills and exercises must not only look at from the standpoint of just the port, but also the other players, the ship operators, the police, the designated authority, and the other entities like the medical entities and so on. Because the issue here is these things will get us in a state of readiness in the event there were to be an unlawful situation taking place or a major incident. Next slide. We also look at the question of upgrading infrastructure, because in a lot of cases you find upgrades in infrastructure in various areas, but in relation to port security, usually that is not always on the high end in terms of the infrastructure requirements for security. And security normally falls in the bottom of the line, especially as it relates to looking at infrastructure requirements. So that is something that probably need to look at to allow port security to operate and perform more effectively. There's a question of the increased national security support. Government need to provide some more legislative and budgetary support as it relates to port security, port safety and security issues. Some of the legislation that we operate need to be relooked at and modernized to be able to allow greater flexibility for the port security to function and to do what is required. So that, I know in a number of the islands, the legislation that's there, there's a slow process, and we probably need to get some help in that area. Because one of the things where I sit, that take quite a bit of time in terms of issues of the legislation, is that all things in relation to offenses or breaches have to go to court. And if you have to, from a security standpoint, take things to court, it takes a very long process. And one of the things we're seeking to do is to change some of these things to be ticketed offenses, where you can have ticketed offenses issued. And that, to me, it's far more rewarding in terms of the way it's done. And I'm sure the officer here from the U.S. in the Port of Miami would be familiar with that, because if you can go through a ticketing process for some of the offenses that doesn't require major issues to go through the court process, then that would be a lot more rewarding in terms of the officers being able to function. So that's one of the areas which we seek to have increased national security support from that standpoint. Because I go and I say, like you've said before, if acts of unlawful interference would have happened in any one of our islands, be it in Barbados or be it in Belize for that matter, it would become it would seriously affect our countries, given the fragile nature of our economies, especially as it relates to tourism. We know tourism is very volatile, and that setback could be felt for a very long time. So if it happens in St. Vincent, this is going to affect not only St. Vincent. If there is a breach or unlawful interference in St. Vincent, it is going to hamper all the islands, because the volumes of cruise ships and cargo ships that utilize those areas will then mean there will be an immediate thing. Because you heard the NTSB, if there's an issue and it involves a U.S. vessel or it involves a considerable amount of U.S. passengers, then they step into the whole investigation process. And that could mean a serious difficulty or challenge for the islands in terms of the survival of their various economies. And you've heard that once they take evidence, it's a matter of 2 years, which you would have to have before they can actually give back that kind of evidence. So these are some of the issues that we have to think of, and it's more preventive in relation to the security things that we do. Next slide. So, in conclusion, despite those challenges that I've talked about, there have been a number of interventions by the port security in Dominica. These are just a few photographs of things we've been able to find at the port that from port security standpoint, and that does not include the Coast Guard, that's just the port security doing so. We've had interception of illegal and dangerous substances. We've had illegal firearms and ammunition, as you can see in this slide. And we have apprehended and successfully prosecuted a number of offenders in the illicit trade. And confiscated large sums of currency as well. Because, you know, the law in Dominica gives the port security official equal status as a police officer. So within the ports, the only thing that the security officer has to do is to turn the person over to the police for the thing. But the security officer himself does have equal rights as a police officer. So it makes it very easy in terms of being able to undertake that. Next slide. So the port management will continue to perform its role in strengthening port security by constantly reviewing its processes and updating its security plan as the need arises. So we are in constant review of the processes, and we want to ensure that we can get the assistance of those of you who are here, and especially our neighbors in the north that do have resources that they can bring to bear in terms of helping us to be able to better secure the persons, cargo, and vessels moving through our ports in the region. Next slide. Thank you.
Chris.
Good morning to all. Alexander from St. Lucia Port Authority. In relation to my colleague from Dominica, as it relates to the ticketing offense, within the Shipping Act, and I think most of the OACS countries, we have similar legislation from the Merchant Shipping Act. There's a section in the Shipping Act which relates to compound of offenses, where it gives the director of the Maritime Administration latitude, where when he can actually fine persons for certain offenses up to 5,000 EC dollars. So I think that's some area, maybe Dominica or the other states as well. I don't know if we can transfer that same concept into the maritime security aspect, but there is a proviso in the Shipping Act.
Okay, I'm aware of the
compound offenses.
I'm aware of this, the provision of that within there, but that's specific to maritime related issues.
Yes.
That is in the act, but I'm talking about specific issues as it relates to the seaport facilities and so on.
Yeah.
Because from our experience, it takes too long when you put those things through the court system. At least 2 years before you get anything. And that sometimes is frustrating, even for the very security officer who is procuring the charges.
Yeah, but I'm actually concurring with your sentiment in terms of using that particular regime to see if it can be translated to the security aspect of it. So that's one area. And the other area I'm looking at, I've heard my colleague from Barbados and echoed by Dominica as well, in terms of the regional approach. And I'm saying I know there's a transportation committee that was formed 2 months ago. I know Barbados, Dominica, there was a meeting, food meeting in St. Lucia last month. And I'm saying that I think it may be opportune to include ship security as a fundamental part of that CARICOM Transportation Committee, which has just been formed. I know Commander Robin from St. Vincent is the lead on that committee. So I think that would be appropriate to have that included as a agenda item in that committee. And also in terms of, I think we have sold on the idea in terms of having that regional committee But I think we need to bring in the actual policymakers to bring it to the other stage. I mean, we'll be here, we'll be in agreement as to the importance of it, but I think we need to bring in the policymakers to buy into it. So I think, again, I would suggest respectfully for the OAS that maybe when those ministers meet or the foreign ministers meet, that if they can fit port security as an agenda item on those meetings, I think we need to give that some higher priority or precedence. So I think another area would be in terms of bringing port security on the committee as part of an agenda item when the ministers or the foreign ministers meet, because we are sold on the idea, we have already agreed, but we need to bring the policymakers now to buy into it. So I think we need to bring it into maybe we can get one rep to come and give a presentation to all our foreign ministers to see the necessity, or our security ministers as well, to see the necessity of having that committee for the CARICOM region or even for the hemispheric region. So I think we need to up the ante and not just leave it at that level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you, Benoit. Again, I think congratulations. I think you guys are doing the right things, looking ahead and trying to prevent and foresee. Sorry, you just got up. I also welcome and hear your opinion on the need for training, for having that common base, for sharing that information and those training programs regionally, and as far as legislation. So again, and then Chris from St. Lucia echoed that feeling, and we have David Jean-Marie here, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Barbados, and it is that authority who will be here in June. So we need to take it to that level in June, and then blow it up. But it is crucial that from now to then, and I am here to assist in any way I can, but it is important that the Caribbean community, led by perhaps Barbados, who's taken sort of the lead of that, but it is really up to you. Don't let me determine who leads anything. To send me a quick proposal, a quick saying we're on it, right? We need this, so that we can include it then, like Chris said, in the agenda in June, and we bring it up before the committee in full, all 34 members, and we get an approval, an okay, to work on this regional, should say framework, security framework. So thank you. Yes, Anthony.
If no one minds, I commit to send you that proposal by next Friday.
I don't think anybody does. I think that was a unanimous approval there. Thank you very much. And we can work it together if need be. Please account with me at all times. Anyway, unless anyone wants to address Benoit, who's moved, but he's still here on Dominica, we will move to the next presentation. All right. Le toca a Moises. Now, Moises Antonio Dominguez from the Dominican Republic, not to be confused with Dominica. Dominican Republic shares its island with Haiti. It's closer to Jamaica, up in the Greater Antilles, So, pásale, Moises, por favor.
You still put them together.
Gracias. Buenos días a todas las delegaciones de los diferentes países aquí representados y a la mesa directiva, por supuesto. En primer lugar, deseo expresarle en nombre del presidente de la Comisión para la Modernización y la Seguridad Portuaria, ingeniero Juan Carlos Montaz Artero, una sincera felicitación a la Secretaría de la Comisión Interamericana de Puertos, así como al Departamento de Transporte de la Administración Marítima de los Estados Unidos por haber organizado este magnífico evento que desde ya está dando frutos, como así acabamos de ver. Mira, Daba más lento. Ok.
Sí, sí, va uno atrás.
Ok, los aspectos marítimos o del ámbito marítimo son de vital importancia para la República Dominicana por su doble condición de isla y por su ubicación estratégica en términos geográficos. Alrededor del 90% del comercio de nuestro país se hace por vía del comercio internacional y siendo los Estados Unidos nuestro primer socio en esta materia. El sector comercio representa, por su parte, aproximadamente el 9% del Producto Interno Bruto de la nación dominicana. Para desarrollar el comercio internacional, se requiere que se cumplan los estándares y los acuerdos internacionales sobre seguridad propios de las diversas actividades envueltas en el transporte marítimo. Por tanto, el mejoramiento de la seguridad en todos los aspectos relativos al mismo incide en su desarrollo y, en última instancia, en las condiciones económicas de todos nuestros pueblos. Podemos decir que en lo que se refiere a la seguridad portuaria y marítima en la República Dominicana, hay básicamente dos etapas. Una primera etapa antes del inicio de la implementación del Código de Protección de Buques e Instalaciones Portuarias, PBIP, y otra luego de la implementación de dicho código. Con anterioridad a la entrada en vigencia del Código PBIP, los puertos dominicanos no contaban con los requerimientos y procedimientos para lograr unos adecuados niveles de seguridad y protección de las instalaciones portuarias. Esta situación ocasionaba la ocurrencia de muchos robos y una considerable cantidad de polizones abordando los buques en los puertos dominicanos. Además, nuestros puertos eran más vulnerables al tráfico de sustancias prohibidas, a la contaminación del medio ambiente, y los riesgos de sufrir accidentes eran obviamente mayores. A raíz de la emisión del decreto 1082-03, en fecha 25 de noviembre del 2003, en el cual se nombra a la Autoridad Portuaria Dominicana como autoridad designada para la implementación del Código Internacional PBIP, y a partir de la entrada en vigencia con carácter obligatorio de las medidas contenidas en el referido código el 1 de julio del 2004, es cuando se inicia el tránsito hacia un mejoramiento real de la seguridad portuaria en el país. Para ese entonces, la Autoridad Portuaria Dominicana, APORDOM, por limitaciones económicas no podía cubrir los costos de las inspecciones de seguridad y la implementación de todas y cada una de las medidas que conllevaba la puesta en vigencia del referido código. Ante esta situación, esta institución le sugiere al Poder Ejecutivo la emisión de un decreto que condicionara la participación del sector privado en las iniciativas de seguridad a implementar. En fecha de 16 de junio del 2004, se emite el decreto 535-04, mediante el cual se logra este propósito. A partir de ese entonces, el país ha logrado gradualmente la certificación del Código PBIP en los 12 principales puertos dominicanos. Y además, los dos principales tienen certificaciones adicionales también. Naturalmente, en todo este proceso de cambios, hemos contado con la valiosa cooperación del Servicio de Guardacostas de los Estados Unidos de Norteamérica, de la Comisión Interamericana de Puertos y de la Organización Marítima Internacional, entre otras entidades, sin cuya ayuda imposible hubiese sido este proceso. Comisión Presidencial para la Modernización y Seguridad Portuaria. No way. Esta institución fue creada mediante el decreto número 14405 de fecha 21 de marzo del 2005, con el objetivo de garantizar e incrementar mayores niveles de coordinación y un adecuado funcionamiento de las instituciones relacionadas con el manejo, utilización y servicios de los puertos dominicanos. El Cuerpo Especializado de Seguridad Portuaria, CESEP, Es una institución apéndice del Ministerio de las Fuerzas Armadas. Fue creado mediante el decreto 746 el 15 de septiembre del 2000. Su dirección recae sobre un almirante o un general de las Fuerzas Armadas. Su misión es dirigir, en coordinación con APRODOM, la aplicación de la política nacional en materia de protección portuaria, manteniendo los niveles de seguridad y combatiendo todo tipo de delitos en los puertos del país, así como velar por el cumplimiento de las normas, procedimientos y regulaciones requeridas a nivel internacional. La Autoridad Portuaria Dominicana, otra slide, por favor. El siguiente, por favor. La APORDOM, por sus siglas, creada mediante la Ley 70 del 17 de diciembre de 1970, es actualmente la autoridad designada, la cual faculta al cuerpo especializado, al CESET, por la responsabilidad de velar en la implantación referida al Código PBIP. Próximo, por favor. La DGA, o Dirección General de Aduanas, facilita y controla el comercio de la República Dominicana con el resto del mundo, teniendo como fundamento la eficiencia y transparencia de los procesos aduaneros acorde con las mejores prácticas internacionales de administración aduanera, controlando así la evasión fiscal y el comercio ilícito. Próxima, por favor. La Armada de la República Dominicana, por su naturaleza, obviamente, tiene por misión defender la integridad, soberanía e independencia de la nación en el mar, asegurando el cumplimiento de la Constitución, las leyes, acuerdos internacionales, con el propósito de salvaguardar los intereses del Estado Dominicano. A esta institución le corresponde, además, la responsabilidad de mantener el orden público de nuestras costas y aguas territoriales, proteger nuestro medio ambiente marino, combatir la piratería, el narcotráfico, así como las contravenciones a las leyes y disposiciones sobre navegación, comercio marítimo y la pesca vigentes en las leyes y disposiciones contenidas en los tratados internacionales de los cuales el país es signatario. Próxima, por favor. La DNCD, o Dirección Nacional de Drogas, es el organismo del Estado comprometido con la tarea de contrarrestar y controlar el tráfico, venta y consumo de drogas y sustancias controladas. Próximo. Hablemos brevemente sobre el sistema portuario. El sistema portuario nacional está conformado por 12 recintos portuarios principales, de los cuales 7 están bajo la administración y operación directa del Estado. Próxima. A través de la Autoridad Portuaria Dominicana, y 5 operan bajo la modalidad de concesión. Entre las concesiones, 2 fueron construidos por el sector privado. Estos son el puerto de Caucedo y el puerto de La Romana. Los 3 restantes son construidos por el Estado Dominicano y concesionados al sector privado. El sistema portuario nacional incluye también terminales especializadas. Próximo. Ahí vemos un cuadro donde se muestran los 5 que están administrados directamente por la APORDOM, que son Asua, Barahona, Puerto Plata, Manzanillo, Arroyo Barril, Romana y San Pedro, Boca Chica. Luego vemos los puertos construidos por el sector privado, que son Central Romana y DP World Caucedo. Próxima. La próxima, por favor. Muévelo más, otra más. Ok. Fortalezas. Hemos logrado una sinergia entre las diferentes instituciones gubernamentales y el sector privado. Las instituciones que mencioné al principio, junto con el sector privado, hemos logrado los avances que hemos mencionado. Esto ha permitido la certificación del código PBIP en los principales puertos dominicanos, así como también certificaciones BASC y CTPAT en los 2 principales puertos, es decir, en Caucedo y en Jaina, que es el HIT, o sea, Jaina Terminal, HIT. Próximo, por favor. Detrás, por favor. Bueno, déjame la grafiquita. Ahí vemos unas breves estadísticas específicamente del puerto de Río Jaina, de los últimos 7 años, Y obviamente se ve la reducción tanto del polizonaje como del intento o de los robos ejecutados. Favor, detrás, mueve dos atrás. Ok, ¿qué tenemos que mejorar? Tenemos que mejorar o eliminar básicamente el abordaje de polizones fuera de costa. Esto está ocurriendo fuera ya, una vez el barco ha salido del puerto. Mejorar el sistema de señalización para la navegación, es decir, los faros, las balizas, etc. Actualización de las cartas náuticas y lograr continuar la certificación BAS y CTPAT en otros puertos dominicanos. Finalmente, nuestro reto es lograr formas innovadoras que nos permitan seguir adecuando nuestra seguridad marítima y portuaria a los estándares de clase mundial, sujeto naturalmente a las restricciones que como país en vías de desarrollo tenemos. Muchísimas gracias.
Muy bien, pues, entonces ya te paras. Sí, claro.
Claro.
Gracias, Moisés. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much for your participation. You can get Moisés over the coffee break. He's asked me to do just that. So we got our first coffee break of the day. We're just a bit behind, but the good thing about today is that there's really no rush. There's no, so we can just go on. We're gonna move. We're going to start the Haiti's Mr. Villiers presentation, in a few minutes, maybe at 11:10 or 11:15, and we'll just continue from there and, break for lunch anyway. So don't pay too much attention to the time schedule here. We will, however, complete all the presentations and all the items, regardless of the time. So we're very flexible today on that. So let's have some coffee and be back in about 15 minutes. Thank you.